Right? You need to recognize the things in your life that are making you feel worse, and then the things that are making you feel better, right? And then filter your actions according to that. So my first thing that helped me with my mental health was limiting my exposure to what I saw.
Hi, Anoosh. I'm happy that you made it. I know you have a busy schedule with going back to law school and becoming my lawyer, my future lawyer. So I'm happy that you made it. I know you have been planning it for a while, but I'm grateful that you're here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm definitely here to support you. I think this is such a great idea. And actually, since you asked me, I was like, why don't I ever listen to podcasts? And then I started looking at the Apple Podcast app. So I'm really happy to be here. This is a great experience, and I commend you for doing something, so amazing like this.
I'm trying to survive here, doing it while not stressing about it, but let's get into it. I know you have been gone from Sacramento, where we at for 3 years with school and, trying to go back to school. And now you graduated and back to law school again.
Yeah.
I have been your friend for almost 8 years now. Since we came here, we've been friends. Yeah. And I know you were, as a social butterfly, you always had friends in here, but then all of a sudden you had to move to school. And I feel a lot of people talk about moving to school, but they never actually talk about the bad side of it. They always like, I have my freedom, I go out, I do this, but they actually never talk about, well, this happens, and this is what I go through, because they don't want to share this part of their journey.
Yeah.
But from your own point of view, as leaving here, leaving your family, all your family lives here. All your friends lives here, and now you going to it's not far. It's still in the Bay Area, but again, you have school, you have commitments that you have to do there. That you come only on the weekends, and you have to you have 2 days to fit your whole life into, and then boom, back again to school.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot, and I think there's two factors to that, right? Number one, the relationship that I had with my family, still have, right? And then also the relationship that I have with my friends. Mm-hmm. To the first point, really, let's just talk about family. I was not one of those people who was like, I want my freedom and I want to move out and I want to be my own girl. I'm a very family-oriented person, right? So actually, moving for me was a bit difficult because we're 6 siblings and I have my mom and dad, right? At one point, our grandma was living with us. Point being, I've always been surrounded by a lot of people, right? Whether that be my community, my family. I never studied alone in my room. I studied in the kitchen, in the lounge. I study best when there's chaos around me, right? So I think the first adjustment period was just getting used to the silence, right? Now suddenly I'm living with only one other person in my apartment, and we're not the best of friends. So she's in her life, I'm in my own life. So I think there's a sense of homesickness to it, which even quite honestly, even the people who want to get that freedom and go away and everything, it's a big change. And I think you may think that you want that, and even if you do want it, you don't realize that still it's a big change, right? You eventually, even if you don't love it, you get used to the fact that you're with family and you have these family obligations and everything. So I think my first adjustment period was just getting used to not having people around me and getting used to silence. Like you said, I'm a social butterfly. I am most definitely extroverted. Silence freaks me out, right? I can't, anytime I'm talking with a friend and we're just sitting quietly, I am the one to break the silence, man, why are we quiet? This is awkward. Right? So I'm always trying to fill the space with something, right? And just getting used to silence was a big thing for me. It was tough, and I can't tell you, my first semester, I stayed outside my apartment more than I did inside because I needed people around me. Right, so that was one aspect of it. And the second aspect of friends, that I think was extremely tough because silence and living independently, I think eventually you get used to it and you learn to adapt to the change, right? Friendships, I think, are a much more emotional thing, and they definitely can be emotionally exhausting, right? Like you said, social butterfly. So in Sacramento and Roseville, like everywhere I went, I became friends with people, whether they were 5 years old or 50, right? And everything in between. So I had great relationships. I loved where I was at with my friends. And I was definitely that person who I feel like I never belonged to a group. Instead, I was that person who was friends with every single group, right? And I loved it. And then you move to a place in the Bay, which, like you said, isn't too far, but it's far enough to where you can't come back every day, but close enough to anytime you feel homesick or whatever you want to go, right? Yeah. There's an issue with that. The first issue is then anytime, and especially social media, right? Anytime you see like your old friends hanging out, and of course they can't invite you, you can't be there Monday through Friday, you feel bad about it, and then you start considering like, well, it's only an hour and a half drive, should I go? But wait, but you have school, but you have these other extracurriculars, but you know, all this stuff. So I think FOMO is the best way to describe that, right? Fear of missing out. That happened a lot. And then because it was close enough, on the weekends, I would feel like almost obligated to go back home every weekend, right? And spend time with my family. And that was an expectation set on me by my parents. It's like, hey, you know, you're far away enough to live on your own, but close enough to where we expect you to come home every weekend, which was great because I did miss them and everything. But number one, it's only 2 days, right? Am I meeting my friends? No, I'm staying with my family because they miss me. They want me on those 2 days, right? And then on top of that, when do people hang out most? The weekends, right? So even if I tried making friends with people on campus, you'd be like, oh yeah, let's hang out on the weekend. And be like, oh, I'll be in Sacramento. Yeah. But I'm not hanging out with my friends, I'm with my family. So I think like my point, my long-winded answer to your question is it was a big change. Whether you like that change or not, any change will definitely, like, there's an adaptation period required, right? And then on top of that, just recognizing that because you went through such a big change, your friendships, your life, like what you had expected or envisioned your life to look like is completely going to change. And you need to alter your expectations in accordance with that. So.
But what was your breaking point? When did you realize this is how it is? Especially you're staying in the Bay Area for another 3 years for you know your lawyer school. Now you're not gone for a few times. No, now you're gone for longer. Now you're almost 6 years gone. So when was the time where you're like, I'm done with this? I have to make it work. Like this is gonna have to happen.
Honestly, I don't think I'm done with it. I think I still have this expectation, like I can be in 3 places all at the same time. But I think, so my first semester was very hard, right? Because I'm expecting like my best friends in Roseville to still be my best friends. And then naturally, sometimes that just falls apart, you know? And yeah, I still see those friends and it's like old times, but again, I can't be there every time. I'm not a great texter. I'm not going to be texting you all the time, right? Everything. But I think, I don't know if, like I said, it's an ongoing thing. But I think there's a couple of different breaking points, right? My first breaking point was just deleting my personal Instagram, personal social media, because that is constantly showing you like the life of your Sacramento friends, the life of your Bay Area friends, and how you're not involved in either, because you can't be in that many places at once. So I think my first breaking point, which I'm so glad I did, was just I deleted my personal media. Like I just deleted the app. I deactivated the account, and I was out of there, right? So that was a big breaking point that helped me. And I think my second breaking point was eventually I just had really difficult conversations with friends who, to me, I felt like they would just understand that, like, I've moved away, I can't be there, but I still love you and everything. And I think I had a lot of difficult conversations with friends where they felt like I didn't love them anymore, you know, and I was like, wait, that's not what not what it is. Like, if anything, I feel like I'm not involved enough and I'm not able to keep up with you and everything. So I think my second breaking point was having those difficult conversations, because in my head, I felt like everybody should just acknowledge the struggle that I'm going through, even though I didn't voice that struggle, you know? So there is that. And I think my third breaking point would probably be just the multiple events that I had to miss. And the fact that, so multiple events that I had to miss back home, and then the fact that I was at the end of my technically my junior year at Berkeley, and I quite honestly didn't really make any friends. You know, I had acquaintances in class who would ask for help in a study group, but I didn't make any friends. And I felt really weird about it because I'm social. It's easy for me to make friends. And now all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I don't have a single Berkeley friend that I could say, you know, I have this friend and I'm going to bring them home, right? So I think that was another breaking point, is like just ending the semester with like, oh, man, like sure, I'm doing great in my classes, but like socially, I feel so lonely, you know? And I think it ties back to that silence thing of like, I had to get used to silence because now I'm alone and I'm not living with my family, but also silence because I don't have that many friends. And maybe that's okay. And I think that's when I started lowering my expectations. When an entire year passed, I got hurt. And then at the end of the year, I looked back at it and I was like, okay, you know what? Like, alhamdulillah, like fortunately, I did great in school and I'm doing okay. And my family still loves me. And even if I can't be there all the time, I still have people that I feel like I can rely back on, you know? And so, I think at that point, I was just like, at that point in my head, I thought, I'm not going to make any friends. If I make a friend, great. But I'm not expecting to make any friends right now. And a big part of that was because I knew that I wanted to apply to law school. So like I had that in my mind of like, I'm having to do jobs and internships and everything to make sure that I had a really strong application for law school. So, I mean, that was a part of it, right? Is like any little time I would get, I was focusing on like looking for a job and everything. So I think college, and especially moving away from college, is not what they show in the movies. And if you go in with that expectation, like your roommate's going to be your best friend, you're going to, you know, have like a great time, you're going to go to parties, you're going to have so much fun, you're going to have this freedom, etc. It is not like that. And do not go with that expectation, because the only thing that expectation will do to you is fail you, right? But the minute that you lower your expectations, if something good does come along the way, like my roommate now, I love her, you know, and we're best friends. So she was like this blessing that came, and to me, if she hadn't come, it's okay, because I wasn't expecting her to come. But now that my expectations were lowered and I do have her, it's the best thing ever. So yeah, it's a process. It's still going. I'm not the best at it, but just it's not like the movies. I think it is not. Like I think that's a piece of advice that I could give. It's not like the movies.
Two questions out of what you have been saying is, first one, why did you have a hard time making friends? Like, for me, knowing you for years, you know how to start a conversation. Like, you're better than me. Like, I can just sit down, just when friends comes my way, cool, let's do it. But I'm not gonna be the one like, let's be friends, you know. I'm the one that even like after years I proposed, remember? But like that's because we're really good friends.
That's what she proposed to me.
I did propose first. And then the second question is, why are you I moved from the Middle East, so I understand like that FOMO vibes where like I see them like coming all around traveling together, and I'm like setting my butt here, I can't do it. And I'm not gonna travel every single weekend, you know. But how did you kind of manage between putting yourself in the mindset of, okay, like I know I'm upset about this, but at the same time, like I have to have a good mental health for school, for family, for just even yourself. So those are two questions I feel like, I'm asking you about them. I don't even know.
Yeah. Well, to your first point, why was it hard to make friends, especially for a person like me who like is friends with everybody? I think a big part of that was the fact that I transferred there. And so I was going into my third year, right? I did community college here for the first 2 years, which highly recommend. We should do another podcast about that. We talk about all the benefits. I loved it. It was a great experience.
I love the Sierra College vibes. It was the best.
Yeah, Sierra College, and then just like financially it's so much better for you. Emotional intelligence builds, because you're like looking to transfer, you're going to work harder rather than being at a 4-year university and then just kind of being like in party mode because you're already there. But that's another conversation. But I think, so because I was a transfer, I didn't recognize, but everybody at Berkeley had already created their groups. And something to know about Berkeley, great university, right? Great professors, everything, but they're very cliquey. Even in freshman year, like I had a friend who I was talking to her about this, of like how I experienced that everybody had their groups, they were really cliquey, and so even if I was able to like get into their groups and be invited to their parties, I still felt like an outsider, right? Because they have all these inside jokes and everything, and I just felt like they weren't very welcoming, and they had this like, we're a group, we have a pact, and we're just being nice by letting you come in, right? I definitely felt that. Well, it's not that I didn't get invited to like different parties and different events and whatever. I did, but do I consider those people my friends? Not necessarily, right? And I was talking to my friend who had been there since freshman year, and it's funny, she said she experienced the same thing, despite the fact that she, and for me it was like, oh, I'm a junior, so I just kept on telling myself that, like I missed 2 years, right? And so that's why, but I think people like came in with their groups and they just weren't willing to involve you into their groups, you know? And then another big thing is like, so I'm Pakistani, I'm very proudly Pakistani. I was born and raised in the US, but like I grew up in a very cultural household and I love speaking Urdu, right, our language. And I'm actually always looking for friends that I can speak in Urdu with, because you just, you know, you can relate movies, the dramas, the jokes that like don't translate into English. And so I looked for Pakistani friends, but unfortunately most of the Pakistanis over there were either like, I hate to say it, but very whitewashed, right? To where they're just there to party, which wasn't my vibe. Or they were the Pakistanis who, like, even international students, they came from Pakistan, but then I feel like they had this complex of, like, they wanted to fit in. So I'd talk to them in Urdu and they'd respond in English. And I'm like, no, like, it's funny to talk in Urdu, like, let's do this. And you know, I don't mean to judge them, but again, they're going through something else. They're trying to fit in and everything. And so they didn't want to create that relationship that I wanted. So I think that it's like a multiple layers. But yeah, I wasn't able to find anyone, you know? And I think don't go into it thinking like, oh, it's cliquey and you're not going to find it. Because then again, right, my next year, like my last year, alhamdulillah, my roommate, I actually had very low expectations. So the first month, like she lives right next, we live in the same apartment. I didn't even talk to her. I just said, hey, welcome. These are the house rules, whatever. Because I had such low expectations. I was like, it's okay if I'm not her friend. And then eventually just one by one, we started hanging out. We became good friends and it was great, right? So again, you can find that friend, but I didn't find that friend and it sucked. But yeah, and I think that a big part of it was like, I expected, like, I went into it thinking, I'm so good at making friends, this won't be hard for me, and then it was hard for me, so then that made me feel worse.
Like my skills are working.
Right, like this is my personality, and I'm not functioning to like my utmost potential, but I think, again, it goes back to like just having that big expectation that everybody's going to like you because they always have, which it's so funny. I feel like we're going to have viewers and they're like, I don't like her. No, I like her. Thank you. Appreciate it. You're feeding into my ego. So yeah, I think that was a big thing. Lots of clickiness. And if there's one like piece of advice that I would give you out of this, like when I look for friends, I look for people who are welcoming to others, right? Whether they be new, whether their personality doesn't match with you, I don't care. You need to be welcoming, right? That's like, even like Islamically, like that's a thing, you know, you there's no empty seats or whatever. You see somebody standing, you call them in and you say, come sit with me, right? That I think speaks to your character so much more than anything else. Like, even if I don't click with you on a personal level and we don't share all the same jokes, if I see that you're a welcoming person, I respect you. Exactly. I respect you because I've been on the other side of that, right? And I know what it means to not feel welcomed. So that's a big thing. To your second point, mental health balancing. So, I mean, like I said, it never gets easier.
Yeah.
And I still will see a picture of like a party I wasn't invited to, and I'll still feel bad about it.
Yeah.
But I think there's two things of this. Number one, just cutting your like the exposure that you get to that. For me, that was deleting my social media, right? And that, quite honestly, I think I just recognized, like, the more that I see this, the more it hurts my mental health. It's not helping me in any way. Yeah. Now, of course, as a caveat, like, you know, I have my little business, so I have to have an Instagram for that, right? But even limiting who I follow on that, just so I'm not getting this constant exposure. So I think, like, the very first thing for me was just recognizing that exposing myself to times when people are hanging out without me is just going to make me feel worse. It's not doing me any good.
If you guys are in Bay Area or Sacramento, hit her up on Instagram.
Yes.
Henna by Anoosh.
Henna by Anoosh, exactly. I got you for all your henna needs.
Gotta get the discount.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I would love to do your guys' henna. I should have done it so I could, like,
done mine.
Like YouTube, right? Yeah.
Be a good,
I'll think about it. I'll think about it. So yes, right? Limiting your exposure and just recognizing that it's not good for you, right? Yeah. Just, I think that being in tune with your emotions, which may sound like such like a hippie thing or whatever, but it's true, right? You need to recognize the things in your life that are making you feel worse, and then the things that are making you feel better, right? And then filter your actions according to that. So my first thing that helped me with my mental health was limiting my exposure to what I saw. And so what if they're hanging out without me and I didn't find out about it? It's better I don't know about it. You know, I have better things to focus on than feel bad. And then I think the second thing was recognizing which fights to pick. In the sense that, like, yes, I still have people that I would call friends, you know, maybe not the closest of friends, and I can still sometimes see that they're hanging out and they're not inviting me to things, right? And yeah, it feels bad, but I think I decided who I'm going to pick those fights with, in the sense that there were some people who didn't invite me, and I hate confrontation, and I still confronted them, right? Because I recognize that that person is somebody that I value enough and care enough about to let them know that I'm hurt, so that we can figure it out, right? Because sometimes the reality is, sometimes maybe they've just forgotten you on accident, right? That happens. It's happened. Like, how many weddings are there where, like, you don't get invited, and then the reality is that person had 300 people on their guest list to think about. There's so many other people that they missed. They have so many other factors to think about. So if they haven't invited you, maybe it genuinely just could be that they forgot. And if you ask them, they'll let you know about it, right? Some of the other things is maybe they assumed that, you know, you don't talk to them anymore, so now they're thinking that you don't want to be friends with them, therefore they're not inviting you. My point of this is, it's very situational, and you need to give the other person a chance to explain, right? Yeah. And once they explain, if it's a genuine mistake, or maybe they felt like you were ignoring them or whatever, once you go through that difficult phase, then you can tell, like, okay, now I'm going to make more of an effort to hang out with this friend, or, you know, we're on the same page now, so we're cool. Or maybe they just completely dismiss your feelings, and then you realize that they're not the friend that you thought they were, and at that point, you need to check with yourself and be like, okay, this is not a person worth spending my mental health on, right? So I think I very much picked the friends who was like, I'm going to get offended if you don't invite me because I care about you and I think that we're good friends. And then there's the other friends who are friends, but community friends, right? Like, yeah, if you're doing your own thing, okay, cool, whatever. So just figuring out who those friends are, and then sometimes you'll be surprised. People that you thought were really close, you'll have that conversation with them and they'll be dismissive. And I'm not trying to say that it doesn't hurt. It does hurt. Yeah. It sucks.
Friendship breakups are actually harder than relationship breakups.
Right. And it's the worst thing ever. Yeah. But then you know what to invest yourself into in the future.
Especially if you're busy with bajillion other things with the schools and stuff. Exactly. You don't have the time to go in wars that it's not going to take you anywhere. Right. You know, and I feel like I kind of relate to this, like understanding like who's on your team. Not in a bad way. There's people that will be around you, but they're not in your circle.
Exactly.
You know, that those people outside, like, they're important for you, but not as important that you will get the phone and make an issue about something because they don't mean something. Like, they are important, but they're not as important.
Yeah.
Where in the people in your circle be like, you messed up, fix this.
Yeah.
You know, and you have no problem. And I feel like it just becomes a bit more comfortable to have, and confrontation is, I'm not as the best person either, but I feel like when people do that to you, it's not they're fighting you or they're coming at you. It's just basically they want to share their feeling as someone that they feel they're close to you, and they want to feel like you will not dismiss their feelings.
Right.
And I feel like nobody should dismiss anything. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But at the end of the day, if I feel this way, that means my feelings are valid, even if you don't see it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think, I mean, don't be rude about it, right? Like that's one thing. Like, you don't need to be rude about it and be like, oh, I don't care about you anymore, so whatever, do your own, you know? Don't be rude about it, be respectful. But just know, and again, always, like, it has, like, always be welcoming. You know, if somebody is extending their hand out for friendship, you welcome them, right? Like, that to me is really important, but also you can welcome them with boundaries. And again, you don't have to be rude about it, but just naturally you can set these boundaries.
You know, this is back to a point. Sometimes in a friendship, I feel like, you know, especially when you distance yourself because of school, because of whatever new chapters you're in, they get offended. Even though your personality, like, I know your personality is very straightforward. If you don't like something, you're gonna share it. And you're not gonna share it with disrespect. You're gonna share your feelings with absolute respect. But there's certain people that will still get offended by, you know, she said this. Well, you know, why is she being dramatic with this? Or this? That sometimes you question your own self. That you, and I'm pretty sure when you're moving, you can't have that, you know, one-on-one, you know, sitting down, face-to-face discussion. So your only way of communicating is either on the phone or, you know, you're calling or whatever the communication it is, that you lose that reading person's expressions. So the person, because you don't see them for a longer time, they already kind of anticipated, like, oh, like, why is she being so dramatic? Like, she's the one that moved, like, this and this and that. And I feel like, you know, and I feel like from our relationship, like, the past 3 years has been also hard on us just because we, you know, I'm more of a, like, I lost my friends back in, you know, before I moved, so it happened again here. So it was, for me, I was like, oh my gosh, like, it just keeps happening. And for me, I had to realize that each one of us have chapters to go through, and that was your chapter that you had to move on and go for it. But at the same time, it was like, how we handled it was a mature level, like how you were able to confront about it, but other people's are not going to do it. And other people are not even going to respect your way of saying things because it doesn't follow their way of saying it. And I feel like that's, you know, something that, you know, I'm sure you understand.
I mean, I think there's two things to that, right? Number one, I'm big on, like, effective communication.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is when you are reaching out to somebody and telling them, like, hey, you felt offended that they didn't invite you, or you thought that your relationship was more and so they should invite you. How are you approaching that conversation? If you're just going to attack them, yeah, they're going to be defensive. They're not going to care. And eventually you're breaking that relationship, right? But the way that you approach that conversation is, hey, you know, I am telling you this because I care for you and I believe that we're really good friends, and that's why I want to share my feelings with you. All of a sudden, the other person's, like, defense mechanism or their wall should be lowered, right? And then saying, like, hey, I felt this, and this way, and I want to, instead of accusing, ask a question. Just be like, instead of being like, you didn't invite me and what, blah, 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 you can say, I noticed that you didn't invite me. Was there a mistake in this? Like, you know, should I have expected to be there or whatever, right? Give them a chance to explain, right? And then also the other way around too, right? Like, I remember, even like you said, like, we had our own issues, right? You and I did. And there was one time where it was just a breaking point. And I think my thing was, like, with you is, like, I kept on letting it kind of build up, and then it just exploded. So I wasn't the most, like, the best communicator at that time. You know, I acknowledge that.
I handled nicely, guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was going to give you creds right now for that. It's like, it goes both ways of, like, in that time, because I was so emotional, like, I just started ranting out and whatever. And I think what I remember, and the reason that our conversation was able to calm down, was because your response was, okay, what's wrong? Right?
Yeah.
And I exploded. And the way that you took that was like, this isn't like you. What's going on?
Yeah,
you know?
really
we fought for a bit. Like I'll be honest about that. You're like every good relationship, you're gonna fight. You cannot expect that you don't have disputes or arguments or anything. You're two completely different people. You're gonna fight, whether it be like a romantic relationship or a friendship, right? But I think there always has to be that one mediator, right? Whether it's you because you started the conversation by stating your intentions and be like, look, I care about you, and that's the only reason that I'm telling you this information. And honestly, whenever I go into those conversations, I tell people, like, I hate confrontation, but I'm doing it because I believe in us.
Yeah.
And that right away sets the tone for the conversation. And if the other person approaches you and they're being just attacking you constantly and like, you did this and you did that and you're this person and blah, blah, and you've moved on, then you respond to that with care and be like, hey, what's going on? This isn't like you. Why are you exploding on me? There has to be some reason, right? And the fact that they're exploding on you, they care enough to explode on you.
And
like
sometimes
that.
It's just not one reason. Sometimes it's just not you.
Yeah.
You know, and that I feel like, you know, not having, and I understand how hard it is for you to move and, you know, have that disconnection with people, because you can't just get in your car and drive up to their house and be like, let's sit down and talk about this. You know, like I remember when we had our issue, like it was during like your finals or during like, like because you're back to school again. So
I was working 2 jobs
and everything.
16 units.
And for you to come out of your busy schedule and share your feelings, maybe it was too late. Maybe it was like later than you should have, you know, communicated your feelings. But again, everyone has their own timeline of how to cope with your, you know, their issues. And when you still made the time, I know if I don't care enough about you and I'm upset from you, I would not even text you. And this is how I am. If you don't mean much to me, I will just let it go, and I'm not gonna care about it. And you never get a text from me.
Yeah.
But for you to come to me and share your feelings, that means like, okay, like she's not upset from me as like who I am. She's just upset from the situation that both of us are in.
Right.
But I feel like when you move, you lose that. And I feel like I'm saying this from, you know, from your other point of view is when you moved, it becomes a little bit harder because I don't see you much anymore. And also I didn't know that in the weekends you had, you know, family priorities. So for me, like, okay, you're here, why you're not catching up? But then when we sat down and talked, I was like, okay, now she can do it because, again, you know, her family, and she's only here for 48 hours. She has to consume as much as family. Friends can wait. When she has a longer break, we'll catch up.
Yeah.
So I feel like because there was no communication of why you're not meeting in the weekends, for me, I felt I was like, okay, like she could have done the effort. She could have like called me, be like, hey, I'm here on Saturday. Where are you? So for me, I think like when your friends don't have that communication, when I didn't communicate with you, I should also have asked. I was like, hey, Anoosh, like you're here every single weekend, like you know, why did you not stop by? You know where I live, you know my parents. It's not like, you know, we're totally different people. I've been friends for years. Where's the stop here? And then you could have told me, but we'll let it go. And I feel like that's why, you know, I feel like even for me, since, you know, I got married and so on, I've been disconnecting people from my life, not in a mean way, just because I feel they're not supporting my next chapter. And I feel like I hated when you opened that discussion with me, I hated it because I was like, I didn't want to be that friend that pulls her friend down. I wanted to be the friend that you do you, I'll always be here for you. Even if you forget about me for a few years or a few days or a few weeks, I will still be here. And we had a discussion even before you moved, like about my friends from back home. And for me, I feel I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't want her to feel like I'm a hypocrite about what I say, that I say something and then the next day I'm changing what I say because of my feelings. So for me, that was the biggest thing. That thing that, you know, I learned from is like I had to discontinue with certain people because they were not supporting me. And I put myself in your shoe. I was like, okay, well, she probably felt the same way when I was not supporting her and I was just being a toll on her because I was like, you're not talking enough, you're not meaning enough, you're not doing this enough, you're not doing this enough. So for me, I felt really appreciating having that discussion, and I handled it this way because I was like, I understand where she's coming from. And it wasn't me. And then at the end of the conversation, after we calmed it down, it wasn't just me, it wasn't just you, it was just the situation we're in and the consequences that had happened because of both of us not communicating.
Right. I think somebody had said this once of like a lot of like the reason that mental health issues are so just so different and so expansive, like one of the reasons is because oftentimes mental health issues are invisible, right? Like you can't tell if somebody is going through a bad day. You can't tell if somebody has so many priorities that they're about to explode, right? You can't tell if that person had a breakdown and 30 minutes before they met you, right? Mental health is often invisible in that sense, or invisible to the naked eye, right? And I think that that's really important to think about when you're discussing like friendships and stuff, is just recognizing that that person probably has a lot going on that they don't share with you. And don't make it an issue that you're not sharing your issues with me, right? But recognize that they're coming from a lot of other responsibilities, from other pain, from the hurt, you know? So just being empathetic about it, and then also like having those conversations. I mean, I don't want to be like unrealistic, right? Sometimes, you reach out to a friend and they're completely dismissive of you. And that hurts because you put yourself out there, you force yourself to confront them because you care for them, and then they're completely taking it in the wrong way, or they don't care about you, or vice versa, you know? And I think it's just a good indicator of like who you need to invest your time in and who you need to let go of, right? Letting go is really difficult.
It is.
And I had to do that with a lot of friends. And again, if I still see that person, we're happy, we're cool. If I see you at a party, I'm going to be nice to you, but I'm going to recognize that you're probably not going to be the person that I'm calling at like 2 a.m. when I'm having a breakdown, you know? So I think it goes both ways. Always being welcoming, always recognizing that that person is coming from a lot of issues that they don't share with you or anyone else, you know? So just being like human and being like, hey, let's stop and just tell me what's going on. You know, are you okay?
Weakness.
Just checking in.
It's a weakness. And nobody wants to show their weakness. And, you know, even if you're best friends with that person for years, but it's also that step of like, I don't want to tell her what my weakness is. Not because you're scared that she's going to use it against you, but it's just because you don't even want to say it. You don't want to admit to that point.
Exactly.
So I feel like when people reach that point, you know, when you reached that point with me, I was like, you normally don't share that side of you. And like, we talk about deep stuff all the time, but not deep enough that you, like, for each other. Not deep enough for who we are 100%. And I feel like that's okay because, you know, I feel so upset from people like, well, you don't tell me all your issues. I'm not supposed to tell you all my issues. Not because you're not my best friend, but there's certain issues that I just don't want to. I just don't want to share it. I don't even want to share it with myself. If I have a chance for me to take it out of my life, I'll take it out of my life. Why would I need to share it? But it's hard for people to understand that sometimes.
You know, I think also the other issue too, and it goes back to that expectations thing, right? Is a lot of people have great expectations of me, and I have to live up to those. So, funny thing, I like telling people my name, Anoosh, it means happiness, okay? And I like to think that I embody that, or usually I like to make people laugh and be happy and everything. But because everybody is used to me being energetic and social and talkative and everything, if there's ever a day where I'm just tired, I'm just sleepy, right? And therefore, I'm not talking as much. People start freaking out, and they're like, oh my God, what's happening? Did I offend you? Are you mad? I'm like, no, dude, I just didn't sleep enough, you know? And I think that there's a lot of expectations, and so sometimes, like, it goes back to, like, I don't feel comfortable sharing my things with you because I'm constantly putting up this, like, this facade of I've got it together and I'm social and everybody likes me and, you know, I'm doing great at school and I can work and do school all at the same time, when in reality, it's tough, right? At home, at the end of the day, I am not this energetic, talkative person, right? But because everybody expects that of me, it, like, prevents me from sharing my issues with them, because then all of a sudden that expectation, that image that they have of me, it's gone. And that's scary, right?
It is scary.
Because I like the image. I like people thinking that I'm energetic and lively and happy and everything. The reality is like, I don't know, like 50% of the time I am, 50% I'm not, right?
Because during the week you're gone, I don't think your parents expect you coming and start complaining. You know, you think about it this way, like, I didn't see you for a whole week, and the moment you see me, you're like, I didn't, this didn't happen. Like, I know, I expect you to meet me with the energy of like, oh, I miss you.
Right.
But it doesn't work that way, because you were studying, had the finals, you had this, you had that. You're in a negative mood just because of what happened during the week.
Sure.
And when you come back to your house, you expect to be like, you're home safely. You don't need to worry about that.
Right.
But you can't do this, because guess what? You have to give them. You have to give your parents, you have to give your friends something that you even don't have right now.
Yeah.
And it is a big toll. It is hard.
Yeah. It's hard to like upkeep a certain image.
Yeah.
And then also when you allow that to prevent yourself from sharing openly when you very much need to, right? Because you're not going to get through life alone, right? And actually one of my professors just said this to me the other day. She's like, once you graduate from law school, nowhere on your degree is it going to say, congrats, you were able to do this all by yourself. No, right? You need help. And it's okay, like just like on your degree, you're not going to get an additional achievement award for being completely lonely and doing it on yourself, right? Similarly, like nobody in life is going to expect you to go through everything alone. And it can be difficult to share it sometimes, but also recognizing that you're human. And even if you're able to put on an image of like happiness and smile through the day, because that's similar, like you want to put up the smile and everything, just recognizing that you're also human. You don't always have to be happiness, even though that's what your name means, so that
was a strong discussion. I'm happy that we're able to make this happening and make time. I know we've been trying to find the right time to do it.
No, I'm happy to be here, and if anybody, I hope that any pieces of advice you can take.
I personally learned, like she's been my friend for years, but I learned things because you don't share that part. Even we're as close as we are, you actually did not start sharing this part until we had our little argument,
because you don't want to be vulnerable.
Yeah, of course. And vulnerable is all another discussion of like no one wants to be in that place, even though you need to. And sometimes you feel like the words are right on your tongue, like the end of it, and you want to say it, but something's stopping you of saying it. And I feel like when you shared your feelings, I was like, as someone that I know that would not share anything that has to do with her weaknesses, this is big for her. Yeah. And I'm not going to be here trying to be like fighting it. I'm just going to listen to it, and I will share my point of view. I'm going to tell you what I think of this, but not trying to dismiss you. So I feel that was the hardest part, and dismissing people or disconnecting with people. Yeah. Within your new chapter, you're staying another 3 years at school and having this whole career, and after the 3 years, you're gonna start working. You're gonna start the real life. Yeah. You're not gonna have that time. It's not like after 3 years you're coming back and boom, you're going back to normal high school time. No, you're gonna come back as an adult. You have to adapt to different things. Yeah, that's this is how it's gonna work. So I want to embrace all the stages you go through, and I'm happy that you made it here. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Promo sponsored by Henry. Yeah.